At the family dinner, they called my business a poor hobby, but they were shocked when find out I am. The champagne was flowing freely at the penthouse suite, overlooking Central Park, as my cousin Preston swirled his glass with practiced nonchalance. Just closed on that vineyard in Sonoma, he announced to our assembled family. The previous owner practically begged me to take it off his hands. Only Sonoma. Aunt Catherine raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. We just purchased a small chateau in Bordeaux. The previous owner's family had it for 12 generations, but you know how the French aristocracy has fallen on hard times. I hid my smile behind my water glass as the familiar game of one-upmanship unfolded around the Brooks family dinner table. Every month, same script, different props. My relatives paraded their acquisitions like peacocks displaying their plumage, each purchase more extravagant than the last, each story more thinly veiled in false modesty. Laura, my mother turned to me with that particular tone she reserved for public displays of concern. I heard you've been taking cooking classes at the community college. The table went momentarily quiet, all eyes turning toward me with expressions ranging from pity to poorly concealed amusement. Just a little hobby, I said lightly. I find it relaxing. How quaint, said my cousin Eliza, adjusting her diamond bracelet. Though I suppose when one lives in such a modest neighborhood, one needs affordable pastimes. More smiles, more knowing glances, the black sheep of the Brooks family, and her peculiar interest in common pursuits. Speaking of property, Uncle Walter interjected, clearly eager to return to more important matters. Have you heard about the plaza situation? Some mysterious new owner is raising rents and demanding an audit of all the businesses. It's causing quite the stir downtown. Probably some foreign investor who doesn't understand how things work here, my father said dismissively. They'll learn soon enough that certain arrangements are better left unexamined. I took another sip of water, my expression neutral despite the flutter of excitement in my chest. They had no idea they were discussing my latest acquisition, or that the arrangements my father referred to the kickbacks, the health code shortcuts, the tax maneuvers were precisely what my audit was designed to uncover. Anyway, my mother continued with a meaningful glance around the table. We should discuss the Foundation's annual gala. We need someone to manage the catering arrangements, and since Laura has all this culinary experience now, the implication was clear. Give the family failure a menial task to make her feel included while keeping her away from the important decisions. I'd be happy to help, I replied, setting down my glass. In fact, I might have some useful connections through my studies. Studies? Aunt Catherine looked genuinely confused. I thought you were just taking a cooking class. I'm completing my master's in food and beverage management, I explained. Part of my work involves evaluating sustainable supply chains and ethical business practices in the restaurant industry. The silence that followed carried a distinct note of discomfort. The Brooks family catering business, while prestigious, was not exactly known for its ethical sourcing or fair labor practices. Well, my father finally said with a tight smile, let's not bore everyone with the details of Laura's academic pursuits. Preston, tell us more about that vineyard. As the conversation returned to safer waters of luxury acquisitions and business conquests, I checked my watch discreetly. In approximately 48 hours, the first phase of my plaza audit would be complete, and the results would land on the desks of every business owner in the building, including my family's catering headquarters. I smiled to myself as I declined the offer of more champagne. The Brooks family had always underestimated me, viewing my interest in food and management as beneath their lofty financial pursuits. They had no idea that while they were buying status symbols, I had built Harvest Table, one of the most successful farm-to-table restaurant chains in the country, all without the Brooks name or connections. More importantly, they had no idea that the mysterious new owner they so casually dismissed was sitting right at their table, sipping water and preparing to dismantle the house of cards they'd spent generations building. Laura, darling, my mother's voice cut through my thoughts. You're smiling to yourself. Do share the joke with everyone. I looked up to find the entire family watching me expectantly. Oh, it's nothing really, I said. I was just thinking how interesting the next few weeks are going to be. My name is Laura Brooks, 38. the black sheep of the illustrious Brooks family. While my cousins, aunts, and uncles built careers in finance, real estate, and law, I pursued my passion for sustainable food systems and ethical business practices. My family viewed my choice with poorly disguised disdain, assuming my absence from family business ventures reflected a lack of ambition or capability rather than a deliberate moral choice. What they didn't know, what I'd deliberately kept from them for years, was that my little cooking hobby had evolved into Harvest Table, a wildly successful restaurant chain known for farm-to-table cuisine and ethical business practices. Operating under my mother's maiden name, Bennett, I'd built a reputation in the industry for transparency, sustainability, and fair labor practices, everything the Brooks family businesses lacked. I hadn't planned to keep my success secret initially. In the early days, I'd been eager to share my vision with my family, hoping they might be proud of my alternative path. But at the first Brooks dinner after I opened my initial restaurant, when I tried to describe my business model, my father had cut me off mid-sentence. "Laura, darling," he had said with that patented blend of condescension and forced patience. "Not everyone is suited for the intensity of real business. If playing restaurant makes you happy, then by all means continue. Just don't expect us to pretend it's in the same league as what the rest of the family does." That night, I made the decision to build my empire in silence. I would prove my concept not through arguments at family dinners, but through quiet, determined success. And succeed, I did, within 5 years. Harvest Table had expanded to 15 locations across 3 states. By year 8, we were featured in major culinary magazines and business publications. Last year, our revenue exceeded $40 million more than the Brooks family catering business that had operated for 3 generations. Still, I maintained my cover as the family's underachiever, the cousin with the cute little restaurants that no one bothered to visit. It wasn't about revenge, not initially. It was about building something meaningful without the Brooks name opening doors or the family reputation influencing perceptions. But then came the plaza opportunity. The historic downtown plaza had been the heart of our city for generations, a beautiful mixed-use building housing retail shops, professional offices, and, most significantly, the headquarters of Brooks Family Catering. When I learned the building was for sale, my initial interest was purely business-driven. The location was perfect for Harvest Table's flagship restaurant, and ownership would provide stability against rising commercial rents. What I discovered during due diligence, however, changed everything. The previous owner had been extraordinarily lax about monitoring tenant practices, allowing the businesses within, including my family's catering operation, to operate with minimal oversight. Health inspections were cursory at best, tax reporting was creative, and labor practices skirted the edges of legality. Most disturbing were the documents showing how Brooks Family Catering had systematically misrepresented the provenance of their ingredients, charging clients premium prices for supposedly locally sourced organic products that were actually mass-produced and imported. I'd always known my family cut corners, but seeing the evidence in black and white, the deliberate deception, the falsified certifications, the exploitation of workers transformed my business decision into a moral imperative. I purchased the plaza through a holding company that couldn't be easily traced back to me, becoming the mysterious new owner that had my family so concerned at dinner. My first act was to commission a comprehensive audit of all businesses operating in the building, with a particular focus on compliance with health codes, labor laws, and accurate marketing claims. The results would be released tomorrow, and they would not be kind to Brooks Family Catering. As I drove home from the family dinner, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and sadness. I hadn't set out to expose my family's practices, but neither could I, in good conscience, allow them to continue once I had concrete evidence. What had begun as a simple business acquisition had evolved into something that would irrevocably change my relationship with my family. But perhaps that relationship had always been built on illusions, their illusion that financial success equated to moral superiority. and my illusion that I could somehow maintain family ties while building a business antithetical to everything they valued. Tomorrow, at least one of those illusions would shatter. I just hoped the foundations I'd built for Harvest Table were strong enough to withstand the storm that would follow. The next morning, I arrived at my office in the Plaza building before 7 a.m., wanting to be present when the audit results were distributed. My executive assistant, Maya, was already waiting with coffee and a concerned expression. "The audit reports have been finalized," she said, handing me a thick folder. "It's not pretty, especially for the 5th floor." The 5th floor housed Brooks Family Catering's headquarters. I nodded, taking the folder. "Have copies been distributed yet?" "Digital versions were sent to all tenants at 6 a.m. as scheduled. Physical copies will be delivered by 8. I opened the folder and skimmed the executive summary. The results were even worse than I'd anticipated. Beyond the sourcing fraud I'd already uncovered, the audit had identified significant health code violations, systematic wage theft from kitchen staff, and evidence of kickbacks to health inspectors. "Have there been any responses yet?" I asked. Maya checked her tablet. 3 so far, 2 thanking us for the thorough review, and one rather strongly worded objection from Brooks Catering, demanding an immediate meeting with the building owner. I couldn't help but smile. I imagined they would. Let's give them a little time to fully absorb the findings before we grant that meeting. "Your family doesn't know yet, do they?" Maya asked quietly. She was one of the few people aware of my connection to Brooks Catering and my decision to keep my ownership of Harvest Table private from my relatives. "They will soon enough," I replied, reaching for my coffee. "The question is whether they'll come to me for help before they discover who's behind the audit." Maya raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll ask for your help from what you've told me about them?" "They underestimate me." "Certainly," I acknowledged. "But they also know I studied accounting before switching to culinary management, and desperate people reach for any lifeline, even one they've previously dismissed." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from my father. I showed the screen to Maya, who shook her head in amazement at the timing. "I should take this privately," I said. "Hold all other calls, please." In my inner office, I settled behind my desk before answering. "Good morning, Dad." "Laura." My father's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "We have a situation, a serious situation. I need your help." "What's happened?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Some vulture capitalist has bought the plaza and is conducting a witch hunt disguised as an audit. They've made ridiculous allegations about our business practices, threatening our contracts and reputation." "That sounds serious," I agreed. "What kind of allegations?" He hesitated. "Technical violations. Mostly. Paperwork oversights. Nothing substantive. But the presentation makes it look damning. The point is, we need someone with accounting knowledge to review these claims and prepare a rebuttal. Your mother mentioned you studied accounting before the cooking thing." "The cooking thing." 3 years of accounting education reduced to an afterthought before my apparently frivolous culinary career. "I'd be happy to look at the audit," I said. "When would you need me to review it?" "Now, Laura, today. This is an emergency. Can you come to the office?" I glanced at my watch. It was 7:30 a.m. "I have meetings this morning, but I could come by around noon," I offered. "Meetings?" He sounded genuinely confused, as if he couldn't imagine what appointments I might have that could compete with a Brooks family emergency. What could possibly be more important than this crisis? "I run a business, Dad," I reminded him gently. "I have obligations to my staff and customers." He sighed heavily. "Fine, noon. But not a minute later. This is serious, Laura. The family's reputation is at stake." After he hung up, I sat quietly for a moment, contemplating the confrontation to come. My father hadn't asked a single question about my business or life before demanding my help. He hadn't even considered that I might have my own professional commitments. In his world, the Brooks family business would always take precedence over my hobby. By noon, that worldview would be irrevocably shattered. I spent the morning reviewing the complete audit findings and preparing my response. At 11:55, I took the elevator to the 5th floor, where Brooks Family Catering occupied the entire west wing, the reception area, usually a showcase of understated luxury designed to impress potential clients, was in chaos. Staff members hurried between offices carrying files and looking harried. My cousin Eliza, who handled the company's marketing, was engaged in a heated phone conversation about damage control strategies. Laura. My father emerged from his corner office, looking disheveled in a way I'd never seen before. His tie was askew, his normally immaculate silver hair uncombed. "Thank God you're here. We're in complete crisis mode." He ushered me into the main conference room, where several family members were already gathered around the massive mahogany table. My mother sat rigid in her chair, her face a mask of contained fury. Uncle Walter paced by the windows, while Preston typed frantically on his laptop. "I've brought Laura to help with the accounting issues," my father announced, gesturing for me to sit. "Laura?" Preston looked up in disbelief. "What can she possibly do? We need real expertise here, not someone who plays with food for a living." "She studied accounting," my mother reminded him sharply. "And right now, we need anyone with financial knowledge. The regular accountants are too afraid of liability to touch this." "I'm happy to help if I can," I said mildly, setting my briefcase on the table. "Perhaps someone could bring me up to speed on exactly what's happening." Uncle Walter stopped pacing long enough to slide a thick report across the table. "This hatchet job was delivered this morning. It alleges serious violations in our sourcing, labor practices, and financial reporting. It's clearly a shakedown from the new building owner." I opened the report and pretended to skim it, though I already knew every detail by heart. "This does look comprehensive," I observed. "Have you identified the specific allegations that concern you most?" "All of them," Eliza exclaimed. "They're claiming we mislabeled conventional produce as organic, underpaid staff, bribed health inspectors. It's absurd." "Is it, though?" I asked quietly, looking up from the report. "Are you saying none of these allegations have merit?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. My father cleared his throat. "There may be technical violations," he admitted. "Small oversights in documentation or labeling. Perhaps some creative interpretations of labor regulations. But nothing that justifies this kind of attack on a respected family business." "I see." I closed the report and folded my hands on top of it. "And what would you like me to do?" "Exactly. Find the loopholes," Uncle Walter said bluntly. "Identify the weaknesses in their audit methodology. Give us something to fight back with. Or at least buy us time to make some adjustments before this goes public," my mother added. "The foundation gala is in 3 weeks. We can't have this hanging over us." I nodded thoughtfully. "Before I can help, I need to understand the full picture. Are the allegations true? Is Brooks Catering mislabeling conventional produce as organic and locally sourced?" Another uncomfortable silence. "It's standard industry practice," Preston finally said defensively. "Consumers can't tell the difference anyway, and it allows us to keep prices competitive while maintaining margins." "And the wage issues, the health inspector arrangements." "Look," my father said impatiently, "every successful business operates in gray areas sometimes. The point is, we need to find a way to address these allegations without admitting liability or damaging our reputation." I looked around the table at my family members, people who had dismissed my business acumen for years while engaging in practices I found morally reprehensible, people who only called me now because they needed something from me. "I understand the situation," I said slowly, "and I can indeed help you navigate it." Relief visibly washed over several faces. "However," I continued, "my assistance comes with conditions." "Conditions?" Uncle Walter looked outraged. "This is a family crisis, not a negotiation." "Everything is a negotiation, Uncle Walter. You taught me that." I smiled. "My conditions are simple, full transparency about all business practices mentioned in the audit, and a commitment to implement whatever recommendations I make to address the legitimate issues identified." "That's outrageous," Preston sputtered. "You can't possibly expect us to overhaul our entire business model based on your cooking class expertise." "Actually," I said, reaching into my briefcase, "I expect you to make changes based on my expertise as the owner of Harvest Table Restaurants, a $40 million business known for its ethical practices and sustainable supply chain." I laid out my business portfolio on the table: financial statements, press coverage, industry awards. The room went silent as my relatives processed this revelation. "You're Bennett," my mother finally asked, referring to the name I operated under professionally. "Laura Bennett is you." "Yes. I've built my business over the past 10 years while you all assumed I was failing at playing restaurant." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. And unlike Brooks Catering, Harvest Table has achieved its success without cutting ethical corners. My father had gone pale. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I tried, in the beginning. You weren't interested. Eventually, I realized it was better to succeed quietly than to continually seek validation from people who didn't respect my choices." "This is all very touching," Uncle Walter interjected. "But how does your secret success help our current crisis?" I smiled. "It doesn't just help with your crisis, Uncle Walter. It created it." The confusion on their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. "I'm the new owner of the plaza," I explained calmly. "The audit was my initiative, and the results will be publicly released tomorrow, unless Brooks Catering agrees to immediate and comprehensive reforms." The explosion was instantaneous. Preston knocked over his water glass. Eliza let out a shocked cry. Uncle Walter turned an alarming shade of red. "You—" My father's voice was barely audible. "You're behind this attack on your own family." "This isn't an attack," I corrected him. "It's accountability. And it wasn't directed specifically at Brooks Catering. All businesses in the building were audited. Yours simply had the most significant issues to address." "This is betrayal," my mother hissed, "using your position to target your own family." "No, Mother. Betrayal is charging clients premium prices for falsely labeled products. Betrayal is underpaying vulnerable workers while flaunting your wealth. Betrayal is dismissing my business for a decade while engaging in practices that would horrify your clients if they knew." I stood, gathering my materials back into my briefcase. "You have 24 hours to decide. Either commit to comprehensive reforms that address every issue in that audit, or face the consequences of public disclosure. My office is on the 3rd floor when you're ready to discuss next steps." As I walked toward the door, my father found his voice again. "Laura, you can't do this. We're family." I paused, turning back to face the room of stunned relatives. "Yes, we are family, which is why I'm giving you an opportunity to fix this privately before it becomes public. That's more consideration than you'd get from any other building owner." "You'll destroy everything our family has built," Uncle Walter warned. "No," I said firmly. "I'm offering you the chance to rebuild something better, something honest. Whether you take that opportunity is entirely up to you." With that, I left the conference room, closing the door quietly behind me. As I walked toward the elevator, I heard the muffled sounds of argument erupting behind me. The Brooks family was not accustomed to ultimatums, especially from the member they had long considered the least successful among them. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely free of the need for their approval. I had built something I was proud of, something that reflected my values rather than the Brooks family's relentless pursuit of status and wealth. Whatever they decided now, I knew I had made the right choice both in building Harvest Table and in holding Brooks Catering accountable. The real test of family, after all, wasn't blind loyalty. It was having the courage to help each other become better, even when that process was painful. By 5 p.m., I had heard nothing from my family. My afternoon had been filled with meetings about Harvest Table's newest location, set to open in the plaza's ground floor in 3 months. The irony wasn't lost on me while Brooks Catering faced a potential crisis on the 5th floor. I was planning a celebration just a few floors below. Just as I was preparing to leave for the day, Maya buzzed my intercom. "Your father is here to see you, alone." I took a deep breath, centering myself. "Send him in." My father entered my office with the careful assessment of a man seeing a familiar place through entirely new eyes. He took in the awards on the walls, the framed magazine covers featuring Harvest Table, the view of the city from my corner office. "So this is where Laura Bennett works," he said finally. "It's impressive." "Thank you," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Please, sit." He settled himself with uncharacteristic hesitation. "The family has been discussing your ultimatum all afternoon." "And there are different perspectives," he hedged. Some feel you've put us in an impossible position. Others believe you're using this situation to settle old scores. I'm not interested in revenge, Dad. I'm interested in ethical business practices. He nodded slowly. I believe you. You've always had a strong moral compass, stronger than mine, clearly. He sighed deeply. The truth is, the practices identified in your audit didn't start recently. They've been part of the Brooks approach for generations. Your grandfather taught me that appearances matter more than substance in our business. I taught Preston and Eliza the same. But it doesn't have to continue that way, I pointed out. You could choose a different path forward? At what cost, he asked. The profit margins that support our lifestyle would collapse if we implemented all your recommended changes. Perhaps, I acknowledged. Or perhaps you'd discover, as I did with Harvest Table, that ethical practices can actually enhance your business model rather than undermine it. Authentic local sourcing creates marketing opportunities. Fair wages reduce turnover and training costs. Transparency builds customer loyalty. He seemed to consider this, staring out the window at the city skyline. The family is divided, he admitted. Your mother and Uncle Walter want to fight, possibly sue you for targeting the business. Preston and Eliza are more pragmatic. They understand that a public scandal would destroy client relationships regardless of the legal outcome. And you, I asked quietly, what do you think? He turned back to me, and for the first time I could remember, he looked his age, tired, uncertain, perhaps even a little afraid. I think I failed you, Laura. I dismissed your path because it didn't align with my definition of success. I never bothered to understand what you were building or why it mattered to you. He gestured around the office. Clearly, I was wrong about your capabilities. This isn't about my capabilities, I said gently. It's about values, about what kind of business we choose to build. I know. He nodded heavily. That's why I'm here. Against the wishes of Walter and your mother, I want to understand what reforms you're proposing. Specifically, what would it take to address the audit findings in a way you would consider adequate for the next 2 hours? My father and I discussed the details of what ethical reform would look like for Brooks Catering. I outlined changes to sourcing practices, wage structures, transparency measures, and compliance protocols. He asked thoughtful questions, raised legitimate concerns about implementation challenges, and took extensive notes. As our conversation wound down, he shook his head in amazement. You've really thought all this through, haven't you? I've spent a decade building a business on these principles, I reminded him. I've worked through these same challenges myself, and you'd be willing to help us implement these changes, provide guidance based on your experience. Of course, I said without hesitation. Despite everything, you're still my family. I want Brooks Catering to succeed just ethically. He nodded slowly. I can't promise everyone will agree to this path. Walter particularly will resist. But I believe I can bring a majority of the family around, especially once they understand the alternative. That's all I can ask, I said. And Dad, thank you for coming to talk with me directly, for listening. As he stood to leave, he paused by the door. The monthly family dinner is next week. Will you still come? I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. The week that followed was among the most intense of my professional life. 3 days after my conversation with my father, Brooks Catering formally agreed to implement comprehensive reforms addressing all audit findings. In exchange, I agreed to delay public release of the audit results, instead issuing a joint statement about collaborative efforts to enhance operational excellence and sustainability practices. My father emerged as an unexpected ally, leveraging his position as company president to overcome resistance from Uncle Walter and several other family members, Preston and Eliza, perhaps more adaptable than I'd given them credit for. Quickly recognized the marketing potential of an authentic farm-to-table pivot and began developing new branding strategies. The reformed practices would significantly impact the company's profit margins in the short term, but I worked closely with their financial team to identify efficiencies and opportunities that could offset these costs over time. More importantly, I connected them with my network of ethical suppliers, providing a path to genuine local sourcing at somewhat better prices than they would have secured on their own. By the time the monthly family dinner arrived, the landscape had shifted dramatically. The gathering was held at my father's penthouse as usual, but the atmosphere was markedly different. Gone was the competitive sniping about acquisitions and status symbols. Instead, conversation centered on the challenges and opportunities of the Brooks Catering transformation. Laura! Aunt Catherine approached me during cocktails, her expression a complex mixture of respect and lingering resentment. I must admit, your harvest table model is more sophisticated than I realized. Preston took me to your downtown location yesterday. The supply chain tracking technology is quite impressive. Thank you, I said, genuinely pleased by her acknowledgement. We've spent years refining it. I'd be happy to show you the back-end systems sometime. I might take you up on that, she said, surprising me further. The Foundation Board has been discussing more sustainable approaches to our events. Your expertise could be valuable. Throughout the evening, similar conversations unfolded, not warm embraces or dramatic apologies, but small acknowledgments that perhaps my path had merit after all. Even Uncle Walter, still clearly unhappy with the changes, grudgingly admitted that the new sourcing protocols had already improved food quality. The most significant moment came after dinner, when my father called for everyone's attention. As you all know, the past week has brought unprecedented changes to Brooks Catering, he began. Changes that, I believe, will ultimately strengthen our business and our family legacy. These changes have come about largely due to Laura's influence both as the plaza owner and as someone whose business principles we would do well to emulate. Murmurs of assent rippled around the table, a stark contrast to the dismissive attitudes of previous gatherings. To that end, my father continued, I've discussed with the board of directors the creation of a new position, Chief Ethics and Sustainability Officer. We would like to offer this role to Laura, to help guide our transformation while maintaining her independence with Harvest Table. I stared at him in surprise. This was completely unexpected. The role would be part-time, he clarified, allowing you to maintain your primary focus on your own business, but it would give you a formal voice in ensuring Brooks Catering continues on this new path. The offer was both an olive branch and an acknowledgement recognition that my expertise had value and that my ethical stance had merit. It represented a fundamental shift in how my family viewed me and my choices. I'm honored by the offer, I said carefully. I'd need to consider how it would fit with my other commitments, but I'm open to discussing the details. My mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the evening, finally spoke. We should have listened to you years ago, Laura. Perhaps we wouldn't be in this position if we had. It wasn't quite an apology, but from my mother, it was extraordinary. We're in exactly the position we need to be, I replied. It's never too late to change direction when the new path is right. Later, as the gathering wound down, I found myself on the penthouse balcony with my father, looking out over the city lights. We stood in companionable silence for several minutes before he spoke. You know, your grandfather. My father would have hated everything that's happened this week, he said with a wry smile. He believed in appearances above all, surface success, status, the right connections. He taught me that the Brooks name was our greatest asset, and everything else was just details. And now I asked, now I think perhaps he was wrong, that the Brooks name is only as valuable as the integrity behind it. He turned to look at me directly. You've taught me that, Laura. By building something authentic under a different name, you've shown what our family name should represent. It's not too late to redefine what Brooks means, I said. No, he agreed, it's not too late. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the extraordinary shifts of the past week. I hadn't set out to transform my family or their business. I had simply built something that reflected my values and then stood firm when those values were challenged. The plaza acquisition that had inadvertently brought everything to a head would now serve as the physical embodiment of this transformation. The fifth floor would house a reformed Brooks Catering, while the ground floor would welcome the newest Harvest Table location. Different approaches to business, different names, but connected by shared values of integrity and sustainability. And connected, too, by family ties that had bent under pressure but ultimately hadn't broken. The monthly Brooks family dinners would never be the same, the performative displays of wealth replaced by more substantive discussions. The reflexive dismissal of my choices replaced by genuine interest. We would still disagree, still occasionally hurt each other as families do, but the foundation had shifted toward something more authentic. As for me, I found unexpected satisfaction in guiding my family business toward ethical practices while maintaining my separate identity with Harvest Table. The dual role allowed me to honor both my Brooks heritage and the independent path I'd forged. Perhaps that had always been the point, not to reject my family entirely, nor to conform to their expectations, but to find a way to bring my authentic self to our shared legacy, to transform it from within, rather than abandon it completely. In the end, the real estate contract I'd shown them, the proof of my plaza ownership that had so shocked my relatives, had opened a door not just to accountability, but to reconciliation. Not the superficial harmony of ignored differences, but the more complex connection of people who see each other clearly and choose relationship anyway. And that, beyond any business success or status symbol, was the true measure of wealth.